and said, the loudspeaker spoke up and said, the loudspeaker spoke up and said.
That's right. This is Trivial Thursdays on WRFL. Happy to be here with you. And let's see, what is it, September 15th? How did that happen? Yeah, it's true. Seems lovely outside, and happy to be here. I know what makes it even more lovely for me is something I've been looking forward to, which is talking to our friend Jim Embry, who is here, and I haven't seen in person in far too long. Hi, Jim. How you doing? I may have to get you unmuted there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great to be here, Mick. You know that.
I thought I might run into you. I thought I might run into you at the Roots and Heritage Festival, but there were a bunch of people there, so who knows?
Yes.
Now, Jim, I don't even know where to start. All I can tell you, here's what I want to tell you, Jim. Every time you've been on the show, I have thought, God, why can't we talk to this guy longer? So I've tried to arrange that this time for us to have more time to talk because you are out doing so many things. If you could describe yourself like in a couple of sentences in terms of like what you do, I'm going to let you do it because you're often very eloquent with this kind of thing.
Yes, Mick. First of all, it's always an honor to be here with you and the RFL staff. I recall years and years ago when the students at UK were demanding and encouraging a voice, and they developed RFL radio. So it's a long history that I have. And I just invite all the listeners to tune in, take notes, get on the skateboard, go for a great ride today. Another wonderful show. But Mick, the question about how I might define myself. Well, I'll borrow one phrase from my ancestors. I live on a farm here in Madison County, again, that goes back, 5 generations of what I call agrarian intellectual activists. They were folk who were close to the land, small farmers and community people, rural community folk who established a school, a church, and a close-knit community. And they were also intellectuals. Again, my great-grandfather went to Berea College in 1879 with a guy named James Bond, not 007, but James Bond, who is the grandfather of Julian Bond. These folk were activists, again, okay? I had on my mom and dad's side 3 great-granddads that were part of the U.S. colored troops that fought in the Civil War, 3 of those folk, and 2 of them were brothers. That was George and Jackson Ballou. And then on my dad's side, it was Lewis Gilbert. And Lewis and George also fought with the 114th Regiment that kicked Lee's butt in Virginia and forced his surrender, okay? And then these same dudes, General Grant sent about 10,000 black troops to Galveston, Texas, to both defeat the remaining Confederate troops and to protect or to secure the border with Mexico. So these 2 great-granddads were also there at the original Juneteenth, okay, before Granger came. So that's what I mean by activists. I've had folk, again, great-grandparents, grandparents. My mom was the president of CORE, and I was 10 years old up in Covington as a member of CORE. I was on picket lines and sit-ins and wait-ins and being spit on and cussed at, So that's why I say I'm at least an agrarian intellectual activist, and regard that the important mission of every U.S. citizen and every U.S. resident is to be agents of change that perfect the democracy. That's everyone's work in America. However we came here, if we came here in chains or on planes, that is our responsibility, is to perfect the democracy. And I wear 15 different hats, but all that are connected, trying to be this agent of change. So
Absolutely. That's Jim Embry. Jim, one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking was I feel like you and I both share a fondness for the power of stories.
Yes.
And one of the things that I noticed when you were talking just now is you were telling stories that they're both yours and not yours.
Yes.
That you're telling stories of your of ancestors.
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, go ahead with your question.
I feel like, well, I don't know. I always make it up as I'm going along. And I feel like maybe a lot of people don't feel like they have stories. I don't know. I feel like stories are sort of out of vogue for a lot of sort of mainstream people that they don't, they might maybe think, oh, stories are nice if you've got time for that kind of stuff, but that's for kids mostly stories.
Yeah, I think that first of all, there's that larger story of the human evolution, the human journey. And in my view, as a species, we're still maturing as a species because we're one of the youngest species on the planet. We've been around maybe 2 or 3 million years. Flowering, flowering plants have been around 200 million years. That's one example. So stories are, for me, they're very important as a species level, within a family, ancestral level. And as you were saying, we all have ancestors, and all of our, so all of us can share in the totality of the human ancestral journey. Okay, we can all embrace that, and we can also look back at our ancestors, and we can borrow their weaknesses, and we can borrow their strengths. Okay, of what they gave in their generation. And I was just I was pulling some books, from my shelf. I said maybe I'll share this book, but I was invited to write an essay. I'm trying to get this on the screen where people can see it. Um, anyway, We Are Each Other's Harvest is a book that came out just this past April, written by a dear friend named Natalie Bazile, who wrote the great book Queen Sugar that Oprah Winfrey and Ava DuVernay made into a TV series. So I was invited to write an essay in this new book. I call it the Harvest Book. And the essay, while I wrote it, the essay is centered, Mick, right here in Madison County, right here in Lexington, right here in Kentucky. And what I say is, I wrote the essay, but it should be our essay. It tells some of the dynamic people and movements towards social justice that were occurring again right here in Madison County and Central Kentucky, including Lexington, Northern Kentucky, and so forth. So yeah, I agree that we have to embrace the totality of who we are as a species, and because there's also an image, if you will, an African image of the Sankofa bird that shows this Sankofa bird that's this neck is turned towards the rear, picking up seeds to plant in the future. And what it's saying is we can't know where we're going unless we know where we've come from. So yeah, stories are just are so important, and they're inspiring.
Yeah.
And learn a lot, and we should all find different ways, either through the medium of radio and social media, and through dance and singing and art, to lift up these stories.
That's Jim Embry, who's here on the show. Jim, who, by his own definition, wears many hats. And one of those, of course, is, this is something we've talked about, but I love talking about it and just hearing you talk about it more, is the connection that you are an embodiment of, which is the connection of gardening and the soil to, for lack of a better term, social justice. And I was curious if that may be a disconnect for some people. They're like, "What? How does me working out in my garden make any difference anywhere?" What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, of course, humans are. What's essential for human life is air, water, and food. Okay, and the food comes from the soil. So what we're doing when we're eating food, we're eating soil or dirt or compost, secondhand if it's plants, third hand if we're also consuming animals. Okay, so we're eating the soil, and all the spiritual texts talk about, say in the Bible, somewhere in Genesis, maybe the 3rd chapter, it said, that God reached down and picked up clay, soil, and blew the breath of life into humanity. And that's all true. Okay, so and also within our country was founded upon stolen land from indigenous people, stolen labor from African people to do what? To do farming for food and fiber and so forth, to do agriculture. So the foundational contradiction of injustice in our country is based upon land and agriculture. And all the various other injustices that we experience emanate from this foundational contradiction. And now with the whole question of climate change and ecological disasters and whatever, it's very important that humans develop a greater sense of connection to the earth. And the most fundamental and best way to get this sense of sacred connection to the earth is through gardening. And as you know, I've been doing gardening in Lexington for at least 40, 50 years. And we work with kids who can barely walk, who maybe 2, 2.5, 3 years old or whatever, and talk. And we have them in the gardens, and they learn how to work together. They learn how to think in systems, and they have fun. So for me, gardening is tied both, gardening and agriculture is tied both back to our country's founding contradiction of injustice. And it's also tied to our need as a species to develop a more sacred sense of our connection to the earth. And the way to do that is to what is most fundamental for life, and that's food.
That's Jim Embry, who I'm so happy to be visiting with here on the show. Jim, you made me think that I had an image pop into my head, which was the image of I was very, very young visiting great aunts and uncles in Florida. And someone, like my great aunt, Charlotte, I believe, helped us kids put toothpicks in an avocado, what do you call it? Seed?
Oh, yeah.
And then you would like perch it on top of a glass, and it would, in a matter of days, it would sprout.
Yes.
Yeah. Which was, when I think, I'm sometimes an impatient person, and one of the things that I thought about that was it was so brilliant of her to find this way to share a growing, living thing with us.
Yes.
It didn't happen immediately, but in the time that we were there, a few days later, it did. And so we could see this firsthand experience of things growing.
Yes, absolutely. Part of my mantra is everyone should grow something because everybody eats. And our earth operates on various principles, and one of them is the principle of reciprocity. So we're not being very reciprocal. If all we're doing is eating and we're not growing anything and returning that reciprocal principle. Wendell Berry says, one of his quotes is that eating is an agricultural act. People oftentimes tell me,
Love that quote.
You're involved in the food movement and whatever, and social justice movement, and I'm not. I said, no, we're all involved in the food movement because every day we eat, every day we may go shopping and we buy food, we're growing food. But again, everyone should grow something, even if it means taking a simple jar, putting seeds in there, and you're just sprouting seeds for your own sprouts at home. That's growing something. But you can also seek out other areas around your home or apartment or community garden space or space at faith institutions and whatever else. But also I've been involved, in the last year, what's called Ujamaa Seeds Cooperative. And that's kind of like a BIPOC-led, which means Black, Indigenous, people of color cooperative. And we were addressing some of the concerns around COVID when folks who wanted to do gardening couldn't find seeds. Everyone recognized how important growing your food would be during COVID, and many of the seed companies just were sold out. So we recognized that there was a lack, especially of African Americans who were involved actually in the production, becoming seed farmers and growing seeds out to share with their community. So we began Ujama Seeds about a year ago, and now we have a kind of a global reach. And part of my going again to Italy for the Terra Madre gathering will be to meet up with individuals, especially in the 35 African countries that will be there, as well as folk who are in the African diaspora, the Caribbean and so forth, to make those connections with other seed farmers and seed banks, community seed banks on the African continent, and bring that information and bring those seeds back home. So I'll be coming back from Italy soon, and I will have a whole suitcase full of seeds to share with folk. And right now, again, we have this year's supply of Ujama seeds. And if any listeners that are out there would like to get a few this fall, a few seed packages from me, email me at embry@gmail or contact me through Facebook, and I'll make sure I can get some seeds to you this fall for some spring planting. But again, everybody should grow something, and we should all be, because the climate change challenges that we're faced with have to do with agricultural zones changing and the adaptation of plants in different zones. So in our view, it's important that we have these regional seed banks, regional network of people who are not only growing food in their gardens and farms and whatnot, but they're also becoming seed farmers where they're saving seeds within their region. That our responses to climate change have to be at that kind of a bioregional level. Also, so much daggone fun, okay? You out there with all these seeds, you got all these different varieties of seeds and things growing, and you take this. I was putting in the ground last week, Mick. I put in the ground 5 kinds of greens, collard greens, kale, mustard, Swiss chard, bok choy. I put in some green beans, some corn. And, when you take this tiny seed and you put it in the soil, in the dirt, whatever, and then the magic happens and it opens up, and that little tiny seed becomes this huge corn plant. That is still, for me, is just so amazing, let alone beautiful as well. And you get to meet all kinds of people, talk about the questions of social justice and different cultures. Through food and ag, you get to meet all kinds of people who are now in the United States from all over the world. And there's a whole beauty around just how food connects you with people. I was out this past Sunday with a program called AfroLex, and we were meeting with people who were from Africa very recently as immigrants, people from Botswana, from the Congo, from Uganda, from Kenya, from Nigeria, from the Cameroon. And we were there engaging in better ways to connect, and we recognize that food and agriculture connects everybody.
Amazing. Jim Embry is here. Jim, let's take a little break here and come back and talk about some of the other things you're up to lately and some of the things you've been involved in. This is Trivial Thursdays, and we're going to take a quick break here. One of my favorite records from last year was Sonora May's album, All My Love. I want to play the track Colors from that record. And we will be back with Jim Embry and more Trivial Thursdays. If you stick around, you can just be in on it with us, and we'd love to have you. This is Sonora May.
It's shades of blue, mountain layers, deep IQ, done been discovered. We could live in isolation, nowhere to walk, our occupation just love, the way it's meant to be.
Coming to you from the University of Kentucky every Wednesday night, it's WRFL Live. Experience the only show that features your favorite local and regional bands. Tune in to 88.1 Wednesdays from 8 to 10 p.m. for a full hour of Lexington's best local talent, followed by a live performance.
Enjoy tunes from groups you know and love around the area while keeping your ears open to the possibility of something new. If you are interested in performing on WRFL Live, give us a call. WRFL, all the way to the left.
WRFL's programming is made possible in part by Bourbon and Toulouse. Bourbon and Toulouse offers New Orleans-style Cajun and Creole cooking, offering dine-in, curbside, and delivery. Bourbon and Toulouse is located at 829 Euclid Avenue and can be reached at 859-335-0300 or at www.ilovecajun.com. WRFL thanks Bourbon and Toulouse for supporting college radio.
We sure do. This is Trivial Thursdays on WRFL. I'm your host, Mick Jeffries. Happy to be here with you every Thursday from 10 until noon, where we visit with wonderful people every week. You want to follow along a little more closely on social media, you can join the group Trivial Thursdays on WRFL on Facebook. You can watch the show if you like on my page, Mick Jeffries, as well as a few other places. It gets a little confusing, but it's on Facebook Live. And of course, listen to the show if you don't have a radio device at WRFL.fm. We're back with Jim Embry, who I'm delighted to be here with. Jim, thanks for joining us. Jim is a gardener, an activist, and just one of my favorite thinkers. So I wanted to ask Jim, so I noticed that, I know you've got some stuff that, I was about to go into my own kind of thing here. You've mentioned a few of the things. We were talking about Ujamaa seeds.
Yes.
And I think some people would be surprised to, I don't know. I know I was surprised may be a strong word, but like the whole concept of a seed bank is fascinating to me and sort of poignant in some ways. The very idea that plants could be, there's a lot of talk about, endangered species, and I don't mean to diminish any of that, but I'm not sure that I think too often about the fact that plants can also be endangered species.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We have, the human species, we have, by our culture and by the industrial growth society, we have impacted the ecosystem in a variety of ways. We've polluted the air and the water and the soil, and we've caused animals to be extinct. We've caused plants to be extinct. And then we've introduced all kinds of invasive species around the world. That's having all kinds of impact on the ecosystem. So yes, but seeds, are the embodiment of food and agriculture. Again, it was the Earth's wisdom 200 million years ago to bring into being what we call flowering plants and trees that produce seeds, fruit, and things like that. The Earth understood that she had to have these things in place before humans could come along and survive. So I think that humans owe, if you want to call it, a debt of gratitude to all these beautiful array of flowering trees and plants and things that we consume. But seeds are the embodiment of that. So we just think this, and humans have had this sense of sacred regard for seeds, plants, flora and fauna. As we evolve, we recognize how essential these elements were to our own survivability. We've kind of lost a lot of that sense of a sacred regard over the last, say, 500 years of the industrial growth society. And now we're like remembering how important these connections are. And so part of our work within my many hats that I wear is to get people, one of the ways to honor these connections is through protecting, preserving, seed varieties within the slow food movement. And I'm headed to Italy for Terra Madre this coming week, and I'll be there with people from 180 different countries, from all over the world. It's like being at the UN. Okay.
I know. I'm so excited to hear about that.
It's just so wonderful, so wonderful. I meet all kinds of people, and you get to see people. And we missed the last 2 years, of course. But we have within the slow food movement this project called the Ark of Taste, and we've identified almost 7,000 different items. Many of those are seeds, but many of those are different. So heirloom varieties of animals, and how it's important to keep the great biodiversity within the flora and the fauna, the great biodiversity of animal life that we are either caretakers of, and the great diversity of plants, grains, and things of that nature. So we've cataloged around the world in our various slow food presidia and organizations a list of products that we think should be on this Ark of Taste, which says that we should all become Noahs. Okay, we all need to find in our lives various ways to honor these seeds and plants and things. We call it the Ark of Taste, and Mick, there are several items, okay, from Kentucky that are on the Ark of Taste, and one of them is the lettuce. The Bibb lettuce was developed here in Kentucky. Also, some of the seeds that our dear friend Bill Best from Berea are on that list. And so the Ark of Taste is also part of the Ujamaa Seeds movement. I thank you for posting that. Such an important, effort. So we have the Ark of Taste, and then we have, all kinds of elements going on, networks of seeds. There are many wonderful seed companies in the USA, and one of them that are dear friends of ours are Southern Exposure out of Virginia, and they are like the mother in some ways of Ujamaa Seeds. If you haven't seen our purchase from this catalog, they're just kick butt. Okay, seed company, Southern Exposure, Seed Exchange. They're wonderful, wonderful people, and so these things are all again interconnected. I had mentioned earlier that this year, so back in 1972, I helped found Good Foods Co-op, and this year we're celebrating our 50-year anniversary, as are many other co-ops around the country. So we're having in October, we're having some events around Co-op Month, and part of that will be the celebration of our anniversary. Well, so the co-op, again, founded upon three principles of local food, organic food, and healthy food, also corresponds with the three principles of slow food, which is food that is good, clean, and fair for all. So it was easy for me to move from being a founder of Good Foods Co-op into becoming a member of Slow Food, because it was just a continuation of what I had been doing, but also, Mick, is a continuation of what was going on here in Madison County on our family farm for 5 generations, where we were employing the practices and the behaviors of what we now call organic agriculture and slow food philosophy. We were doing that, okay, in my family for 5 generations, as was the case, Mick, back to your point about ancestors and where we come from. That was true throughout Kentucky, okay? Up until World War II, people were doing agriculture, what we call organically, permaculture, and that was how humans, when humans developed, and it was women who developed agriculture some 12,000 years ago, humans had been practicing agriculture organically for the last 15,000 years, okay? There's nothing new.
Yeah.
But seeds are again all part of that, and we have what we call this heirloom collard project. We've identified some 30 varieties of collards that we're trying to get people like here in Lexington and in Kentucky to join in again the Ujamaa Seed Network and the Utopian Seed Project. Okay, and we're growing out varieties of collards. Okay,
I love it.
right now we have in our collection 30 varieties, and we're also doing what's called the Ultra Cross Okra Project. When I was in Morgantown a few weeks ago at this Organic Seed Alliance, Organic Seed Symposium, one of our friends, Chris Smith, who's like the okra guy, wrote a book called The Whole Okra. He had with him make 200 kinds of okra. Okay, so what we're saying is that we need to be aware of the great diversity within plants and animals and honor that, preserve that, and protect that for our own survivability as a species. The greater we have, the greater diversity that we have and that we're aware of and that we're practicing, then our survivability, our ability to develop resilience and adaptation to climate change will be enhanced. So again, these things are all interconnected in our view. And it's just, for me, it's just every day is just so much fun and sense of purpose and excitement to be connecting these dots. It's almost like the idea of telling stories. My grandmother and many of the women in the family would sit around, especially maybe in the fall of the year when things kind of slowed down. They would take all these pieces of cloth, these rags, being piles. They'd sit around and tell stories, and they would make this quilt. And I would think, man, like they're taking these rags on the floor, okay, and when they throw them together, there's this beautiful tapestry, beautiful designs that they would come up with. So that's part of our work, is this great remembering of bringing the members of our culture and our species that are important to us back together again to make a quilt that we can then begin to use as a species to honor the earth and to act more what's called earth-centric rather than homo-centric.
Wow. Yeah, that's Jim Embry here. And, Jim, I love listening to your treatises on these things. And I think about how, as I probably confessed before, as often as not, I really don't want to go out and dig in the dirt and plant things. But almost every single time, once I go out and just put my fingers in the ground, I become, somewhat calmed, really. And I become maybe a little less just completely caught up in my own sort of neuroses and what are you going to do about and how are you going to and all this kind of stuff. So that's kind of magical that happens.
Oh,
I have to confess.
Yes, it is. I've worked over the years with Lexington and Kentucky, many different organizations. And I've had a particular love for what I call working with women at risk, women who are part of the Chrysalis House and they're healing from drug and alcohol addiction, women at what used to be called the Bluegrass Domestic Violence Program. Now it's called Greenhouse 17, okay? Women who were at the Hope Center, or young women at the Family Care Center who were mothering teens, okay? And so forth. And we've used gardening and being outside and working together as part of what's now called therapeutic horticulture. Back when I began doing this work in 2006, people thought I was crazy as hell, okay? You're talking about gardening, and all these other issues are more important. And I would say, well, yeah, they're important, but this idea of gardening, touching the soil that we're made from, can have a healing impact, not just growing food. And now, Mick, you can go to the UK and schools and get a degree in therapeutic horticulture. I was just reading here an article just a few days ago about how there's a whole effort was called with veterans, and they're getting veterans, some who have lost multiple limbs, lost both legs, lost an arm or whatever, and they come back with called PTSD, and they get them out and they get them on a farm or in a garden, and they can heal from the trauma of being in wars. I've worked with women who've come back, who've escaped the war-torn areas, say in Africa, and they get into a garden. And as you were saying, there's a healing impact, there's a healing experience that is in a garden. Yes, we can grow for eating and sharing. Yes, we can get out there and learn the ecosystem and the idea of pollination and monarchs and all that. That's all great fun, but it's also a healing place. That's why when Christ was troubled, something was going to come down on him. That like what's going on? What's happening to me soon? He was troubled by the thought of being crucified, and he went into the Garden of Gethsemane, and he prayed, and he fasted, and he healed from the trauma of what was to come. So there are all kinds of, again, historical examples of folk, finding this sense of healing, spiritual connections within a garden. So we invite all the Trivia Thursday folk, okay, get outside, get some seeds, take Mick's advice, okay, and get outside and recognize the joy.
That's Jim's advice, not mine.
I didn't mention today, but I was out west, this summer for 35 days, 25 cities, 15 states on my Joy and Justice journey in June. Go to my Facebook page. You can learn more about that. I just love you all so much. And Mick, thank you as always, and my divine honor to be here with you. It's an incredible show. You putting the message out there. Thank you so much.
Well, I just opened the mic for you to put the message out there, and you can't leave yet. This is Jim Embry. He's here, and I want to make sure we get to you mentioned the Joy and Justice journey. I mean, that's a big deal. You said 25 cities, 15 states. So I really think you should talk about that a little bit.
Oh, man. Thank you. Well, again, part of how I've been living my whole life, and I'm just so thankful I came out of a family culture where the idea of being activists around social justice and change was so important part of my family culture. But we also had this exuberance, this passion for each other and what we were for family, community, and things like that. So Joy and Justice has been part of my culture and part of my being since I was born and before. But within Slow Food USA, the people of color, African Americans, Asian, Latinx and so forth, recognized that there was a lack of diversity and inclusion within Slow Food USA compared to our experience of going to Terra Madre, where there was tremendous diversity of ethnicities. So we began a campaign back in 2008. I was the primary author of what's called our Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Manifesto. And then we had this campaign to roll out this manifesto to all the different chapters. So we use this phrase of joy and justice as this national campaign to get local chapters to embed these principles of reaching out to their larger community and getting members and getting community outreach and working on questions of food justice and food sovereignty within their local areas. So I kind of borrowed that phrase, if you will, from our Slow Food USA campaign. And then what we did during the campaign, we had friends in Tanzania who were at the Mungere school who made these bracelets for us, the Joy and Justice bracelets. And we were selling those as a way to get, make sure we had BIPOC folk who could attend Slow Food Nations. So I decided to go out west since I'd been invited to take a family trip to Hawaii out of California, where our daughter lives with her family. I thought, wow, what I should do is develop a much larger kind of a journey or a trip out west. I'll call it the Joy and Justice Journey in June. So, so Mick, I left home here on May 28th. Okay, my first stop was one of our sons lives in Memphis. We were there a couple of days, and we went down, of course, downtown to Beale Street. And I happened to see Mick there on Beale Street near the W.C. Handy childhood home. There was this historical marker that said that folks who came to Beale Street, mostly black folk who came to Beale Street, were concerned about it having fun, entertainment also, but it was a place of justice. I said, wow, how symbolic is that? Here I'm beginning this journey, and I'm reading these signs that talk about justice. Now I stopped next in Diamond, Missouri, which is the home birthplace of George Washington Carver. So I went there, and he's like one of my, ancestral heroes, and a lot of what I do, and a lot of what we do now around food and ag is things that George Washington Carver worked on at the Tuskegee College for some 45 years. So I paid homage at Diamond, Missouri, and his birthplace. Then I went on again. I left home May 28th, and I got back home July 4th. I went to, again, 25 cities, 15 states, including Hawaii. I went to about 10 or 12 slow food chapters, and I did a lot of speaking, spoke at 3 universities along the way. I visited some 30 rural and urban farms along the way. I went to about 9 or 10 state and federal parks. I hung out again at the Grand Canyon, Petrified Forest. I was at the volcano, Mauna Lea in Hawaii. I went through, Yosemite and Joshua Tree Federal Park and along Highway 1 and Big Sur and always incredible outdoor places. Also visited about 8 or 10 food co-ops along the way. I did, matter of fact, I mentioned to you, I did a radio interview with Freedom Radio when I was in Minneapolis. They're visiting the George Floyd Memorial and the Twin Cities. And along the way, I took with me again about 500 packages of Ujama seeds to distribute along the way, somewhat like Jimmy Appleseed, okay? And I gave most all of them out. I took with me again the Southern Exposure catalogs. I had just a wonderful time along the way. I met all kinds of people. I got gifted when I was in Phoenix. One of the Slow Food members there gifted me with these topiary beans that had been grown by indigenous people for, thousands of years. I was given just all kinds of wonderful gifts along the way. One young brother, who was in Santa Fe, gave me a small vessel of watermelon seeds that were adapted to the Southwest area, for example. I was in LA, South Central LA, visiting a friend of mine named Ron Finley, the gangster gardener. He gave me some seeds. And it was, so I'm going to do it again next year. Our granddaughter will graduate from high school next June, and I'm already planning to do a similar journey, maybe some different locations. I've been invited. I spoke at University of California in Santa Cruz to the summer internship program. They've had a wonderful, wonderful agroecology project there, University of California in Santa Cruz. And I was blessed to go there and speak to about 30 some odd interns there. And we're working now on my returning and do a 2 or 3 day residency there at the university. So it was just a fantastic time for, again, those 35 days. And I came back home and tried to get some rest. And then I went off, to the South for about a week Southern tour, okay, Southern tour of visiting the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, which has been around 55 years, and is primarily a cooperative of Southern Black farmers, and they address a number of things from questions of land tenure and, discrimination from the USDA and so forth. And so I was there for about a week in that journey, and I went by Spelman College while I was there and met with these beautiful, badass women who were doing wonderful, wonderful food and agriculture work there at Spelman College. And in fact, their garden site was an original site of a victory garden back from World War II. And of course, we hope we all realize that the whole victory garden idea was partly an inspiration from George Washington Carver. Who was
great.
Friends with things like that.
And those who may not know, and refresh my memory, the Victory Garden concept, which is so interesting in and of itself, is what?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, during World War I and World War II, when mostly our men were fighting in Europe, we recognized that men were leaving the farms and leaving the industrial workplaces to fight in World War I and World War II. So the government recognized that there was a need to find ways to replace the men in both the industrial work site and on the farms, and also just to keep the food supply domestically, okay, at the level that we needed to have. So the USDA and the federal government rolled out this national campaign during World War I and World War II that were called Victory Gardens. And in Lexington, there were victory gardens in every school, every church and faith institution. There were huge, maybe 8 and 10 acre victory garden farms, like in North Lexington. There were several in South Lexington, and the victory garden committees in Lexington would write things in the newspaper. Like every week, they would have announcements of what's going on all across the city. So what we're saying now is that in a similar way, we must, again, it's great remembering, we must be able to recognize the needs now to reemploy this idea of victory gardens here in 2022. And I mentioned that George Washington Carver, who had been friends with all the Secretary of Agricultures because he went to school at Iowa State, where the Wallace, Henry Wallace was a professor and went on to become Secretary of Ag, as is his son. He was also friends, Mick Carver was friends with all the presidents of his era. Okay.
I just recently read this, Jim. I can't remember where it was, but I saw that he was an advisor. He was a presidential advisor.
Exactly. Now, I say Carver was an amazing human being. Talk about wearing different hats. He could speak, Mick, to both peasants, meaning the black and white peasants in the South, okay, and presidents. He was friends again with Gandhi. And matter of fact, the whole nonviolent embracing of nonviolence by Dr. King was indirectly related to Gandhi. I'm sorry, to Carver. Carver and Gandhi become friends. They've been writing back and forth, and then Gandhi sent an envoy to USA to meet with Carver at Tuskegee, and then Carver sent a guy named Thurman and then Benjamin Mays to India to meet with Gandhi, and then Benjamin Mays was good friends with Dr. King's father and Dr. King, and Mays said, well, hey, Martin King, you ought to read about this guy named Gandhi over there who's preaching nonviolence, and King embraced that. That was due to Carver. So
amazing.
I've been reading and researching about him, and always try to lift his name up, and whatever I do.
Absolutely. Hey, Jim, thank you so much for visiting. I must selfishly say that I love having you on the show just so I can listen to you tell stories.
My brother, absolutely, man. Love you so much, and love what you're doing. And thank you, as always, for allowing me to come on here and try to get all this stuff in. I'll talk real fast. I got 1,000 things to say.
You can't possibly talk fast enough to get in all the things that you have to say.
But they're all interconnected. And again, we just appreciate everyone who's listening to WRFL Radio and Trivia Thursdays. Get out there and plant something. If you need seeds, call me. Love y'all much.
That's Jim Embry. Thanks, Jim. And this is Trivial Thursdays on WRFL. We're going to come back